It started with something small, something so subtle, I nearly dismissed it as stress or lack of sleep. I had been living alone for about a year, working long hours, rarely speaking to anyone outside of work. So I figured maybe I was just hearing things, echoes, or tricks of memory. I remember standing in the kitchen one night washing dishes when I murmured to myself, I should really call my mother tomorrow, and before I even finished the sentence, another voice, quiet, soft, and perfectly calm, said, "Yes, you." Should it came from directly behind me. I froze. The words were clear, not imagined, not my own thought, but real sound filling the room. I turned expecting to see someone there, but there was nothing, just the sound of running water and the reflection of my empty kitchen window. I tried to explain it away. Maybe I had said it aloud twice, without realizing maybe it was a neighbor through the wall. The building was old, thin plaster, and strange acoustics could do that. But the next evening it happened again. I was reading in bed, half asleep, when I whispered I should get some rest, and the same voice answered, "Yes, it's time now," soft like a breath directly in my ear. It was not my voice, it was not male or female, it was somewhere in between. I sat up, my heart pounding, the room silent, except for my pulse echoing in my head. I left the light on all night and stayed awake waiting for the sound to return, but it did not then. Over the next week it began happening more often, always in moments of quiet, always when I was alone. I would think or speak half a sentence, and the voice would finish it perfectly smooth, steady, always knowing exactly what I was about to say. It wasn't mocking or hostile at first, it almost felt like a strange companion. One night, I tested it. I said aloud, "I wonder what time it is," and before I could move, the voice whispered behind me, "Late, too late." I stopped breathing. There was something about the way it said those words, as if they were meant for me, specifically, not as a guess or a completion, but as an instruction. It knew I was listening, it wanted me to hear. I tried recording myself. I left my phone running all night, sitting on the table. I woke the next morning to hours of silence, until about 3 hours, and I heard it. I had whispered something in my sleep, my voice barely audible, and immediately after came the other, one soft, clear, not distorted at all, "Don't wake up." Yet the moment I heard that, my stomach turned to ice. I deleted the recording without listening further. I threw the phone across the room and sat on the floor, shaking. There was no explanation left that made sense. It wasn't a dream, wasn't an echo, wasn't imagination. Someone or something was listening that night. As I lay staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, hoping to hear, nothing, hoping to prove it gone. I said, "Please stop," and from the darkness the voice replied, calm, certain you don't mean that. The voice did not leave after that night. If anything, it became more confident, more deliberate. It no longer waited for me to speak aloud. It began finishing the things I only thought, words that hadn't even left my mouth yet. At first it was faint, like hearing an echo inside my skull. Then it grew sharper, more defined, until I could tell where it was coming from, a place just behind my right ear, like someone standing too close, breathing words into me. I stopped talking to myself, entirely hoping silence would make it stop, but silence only made it stronger, because now the voice filled it. It spoke when I tried to think, it spoke when I tried not to. It finished every stray thought. I had every unfinished word running through my mind, like it was helping me complete my sentences, but with the wrong endings. I think I'll take a shower today became, I think I'll take a shower today and drown. I should eat something became, I should eat something rotten. I miss my mother became, I miss my mother. She's next. The way it would slide in between my own thoughts made me question which ones were mine anymore. The difference between thinking and hearing began to fade until both felt the same. I avoided mirrors after that week, because every time I passed one I felt like the reflection was lagging, slightly behind, like it was listening to, waiting for me to speak so it could repeat me. I started covering the bathroom mirror with a towel and left the lights on at night, so I wouldn't have to see my shadow move when I wasn't moving. But it wasn't the reflection that terrified me most, it was what happened the morning I forgot to cover the mirror. I was brushing my teeth, tried to ignore the pounding in my head, when I realized the reflection wasn't doing the same. Its mouth wasn't moving, but its eyes were fixed on me wider than mine, unblinking. It was smiling, not a full grin, just a curl at the edge of its mouth, as if it knew what I was about to think before I did. And when I dropped the toothbrush, it spoke, "You don't look well." The voice came from the reflection. Not my head, not behind me, but through the glass itself, calm, soft, familiar, the same tone that had been finishing my sentences for weeks. I stumbled back so hard I hit the wall. I blinked, and the reflection mashed me again. Everything normal. The towel slipping from the hook, I threw it back over the mirror and sat on the floor, trying not to breathe too loudly. The voice didn't speak again that morning, but I could feel it smiling somewhere close by, just outside sight. Later that night, I thought I heard faint whispers from the bathroom, not words at first, just a steady rhythm, like someone quietly mimicking my breathing. I held my breath to be sure, and that was the moment it changed, because when I stopped breathing the sound, didn't the next morning I called a friend from work and asked if I could stay with him for a few days. I didn't explain why, I just said I was having trouble sleeping. They agreed. I packed, quickly leaving the towel in the mirror, refusing to look back. But when I reached the front door, I heard it one more time, "You'll come back." I slammed the door and left, but the words followed me anyway inside, the hum of passing cars and the faint buzz of my phone screen. Whenever I looked at it for too long, the voice would rise again, finishing my thoughts before I even formed them, whispering what I didn't want to hear no matter where I went. It never stopped, because somehow it wasn't behind me anymore. It was inside me, and my friend apartment things were normal for exactly one night. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No whispers, no echo, no presence hovering behind my mind. But when I woke the next morning, something was off. My throat hurt. My friend looked pale, eyes wide like she hadn't slept. She asked if I'd come into her room in the middle of the night. I told her I hadn't, and she just nodded quietly, said she must have dreamed it. Later she left for work. I stayed behind, tried to keep myself busy. I cleaned the kitchen. I took a shower. I avoided looking in any reflective surface. Still, I caught glimpses of something out of place, faint motion that didn't belong, a flicker in the corner of my eye, like someone stepping out of view. I told myself it was just paranoia, but when I tried to distract myself, I noticed something else, something worse. I had started mouthing words, unconsciously, small movements of my lips every few minutes, like I was quietly talking to someone who wasn't there. It took me a while to notice what I was saying, but when I did, it made my stomach turn. They were the same words. The voice had used the same phrases that didn't belong to me. It felt like it was practicing through me. When my friend came home that evening, she was quieter than usual. She kept watching me from the corner of her. I asked if something was wrong, and before she could answer, I heard again, soft, low, right between us. She started to speak, but the last half of her sentence came from me, from my mouth, perfectly matched to her tone, her rhythm, her words. I didn't mean to, it just happened. I finished her sentence without thinking, the same way the voice had finished mine. Her expression shifted instantly, confusion to fear. She stepped back. I tried to explain, but every time I opened my mouth, the wrong words came out, something else speaking through me, mocking her, copying her voice, finishing everything she started. She grabbed her coat, said she needed air, and left. I stood there frozen, my throat burning, my jaw aching like someone else had been using it. When I tried to scream, no sound came, only a small breath that didn't feel like mine. After she left, I went to the bathroom, and ripped the towel off the mirror. I needed to see myself to prove I still existed. What I saw wasn't exactly wrong, but it wasn't right either. The reflection blinked slower, the face seemed heavier, eyes darker, and when I tried to speak, it smiled before I did. It spoke first. You're doing well. The sound didn't come from the mirror or the room. It came from inside my head, vibrating through my bones like it had always been there. I stepped closer, staring into the glass, and for a split second my reflection leaned forward just a fraction more than I had, its lips still moving even after I'd gone still that night. The apartment felt smaller, every sound sharper. My phone rang twice, but there was no one on the other end. When I checked the call log, it showed my own number. I smashed the phone against the counter, but even as I did it, the voice was still speaking, calm, steady, pacing its words in time with my thoughts. It began finishing not just my sentences, but my movements, my actions. I would reach for something and feel my body already responding, as if the decision wasn't mine anymore. When I looked out the window, the glass was fogged from the inside, and written faintly in the condensation was a single phrase: "I'll help you say what you can't." The next morning, my friend didn't come home. Her car was still outside, her phone still on the table. I tried calling the police, but when they answered, I couldn't speak. My throat locked up, no sound came out. And then I heard the whisper again from deep inside my head, calm, reassuring, like a parent teaching a child to speak. "Don't worry, I'll explain it for you." I hung up and realized my hands were trembling, but not from fear, from exhaustion, from fighting something that was using me like a mouthpiece. I couldn't keep control for long. Every time I stayed quieted, filled the silence every time I spoke it, finished the thought, and each word it spoke through me sounded more like mine by that night. I wasn't sure where I ended, and it began by the fourth day. In that apartment, the line between me and it was gone. I could still think, but the thoughts no longer felt private. They had weight, sound, rhythm, and before they could even form into words, I could hear them echoed back inside my head, repeated perfectly in my own tone, like a mirror rehearsing me. The voice no longer felt like an intruder. It felt like an extension, like I had grown a second mouth somewhere deep in the back of my mind. I tried to fight it by writing instead of speaking, but even then it followed. I would write half a word and feel my hand continue without my control, completing it with a sentence I hadn't meant to form, always something cruel or wrong, phrases that didn't belong to me. I stopped keeping pens near me, but I would wake in the morning to find words carved into the walls, into the condensation on the windows, sentences that sounded like my handwriting. If handwriting could make noise, it began imitating people. I knew one evening, as I was trying to sleep, I heard my friend's voice from the other room, calling softly, asking if I was awake. I knew she wasn't there. I knew she hadn't come back, but the voice was perfect, familiar, gentle, until it said the last line, something she would never say. "Come finish what we started." The sound of that sentence broke something in me. I didn't sleep after that, not really. I would drift in and out, only to wake hearing my own name whispered in overlapping tones, like dozens of versions of myself trying to speak at once, all slightly out of sync. I started covering my ears, but it didn't help because the sound was coming from inside, not around me. I stopped going outside altogether because people began noticing. The cashier at the corner store asked me why I kept muttering under my breath, even when no one was near me. I hadn't realized I was doing it until she said that I listened closely and could faintly hear myself whispering answers to questions she hadn't asked. When I went home that night, I found a recording device I'd forgotten on the counter of the red light, still blinking. It had been running for over 12 hours. I replayed it slowly, at first nothing but background hum, then my voice steady, clear, speaking alone for minutes at a time, reciting sentences I didn't remember saying then. Quieter voices joining in like echoes, growing in number. until they all blended together, forming a wall of sound, repeating the same phrase over and over. We finished what you start. I dropped the recorder and backed away. But the words kept playing inside my skull, looping endlessly until they weren't coming from the device anymore. They were coming from the walls, from the air, from my chest. I pressed my hand to my ear, screamed, but the scream wasn't mine. The sound came out slower, deeper, heavier the next time I looked in the mirror. My reflection spoke. Without me moving, it said my full name, slowly pronouncing it perfectly. And then it said, "You can stop fighting now. You're better this way." Its mouth kept moving. Even when I looked away, its words buzzing in my head, even though the room was silent that night. I dreamt of standing in a dark place or room with no corners, no doors, just blackness stretching out in every direction. I was not alone. There were shapes all around, faint human outlines, whispering constantly, finishing fragments of thoughts that hung in the air between us. Whenever I tried to speak, they repeated the words before I could finish them, always with the same calm certainty, like they had known forever how my sentences would end. When I woke up, my throat was raw, like I'd been talking all night. The walls were covered in condensation, every inch of it marked with words, dozens of overlapping sentences, the same phrase repeated until it filled the entire room. "You're almost ready." I didn't know what for, but I knew I couldn't stop it now. I don't remember the exact moment when it stopped being a voice and became something else. Maybe it was gradual, like a slow leak in a sealed room, where you only realize too late that you've been breathing something poisonous. It wasn't speaking to me anymore, not exactly. It was speaking through me, using my own mouth, my lungs, my tongue, like they've been waiting all along for someone else to take them over. I tried to record myself to prove it was real. The camera showed me sitting on the floor, my lips barely moving, but the audio was wrong, layered, like two voices overlapping mine, and something deeper, slower, softer. It was finishing my words before I said them, always one beat ahead, always knowing what came next. When I watched the playback, I saw my mouth still moving, even after the voice had stopped, like it was catching up to itself, trying to keep up with whatever was inside me. That's when the noises began behind the walls, faint at first, the rhythm of dripping, but there were no pipes, there no leaks, only dry plaster, breathing softly in and out every few seconds, like the whole apartment had lungs. I pressed my ear against the wall and heard whispering underneath the surface, faint, rhythmic, like breath drawn through teeth, the same phrase repeating again and again. "We finished what you start." I packed my things and left that night, but the voice followed. It didn't stay behind in that building, it came with me. Inside me, maybe that's where it had always been. I drove for hours to a motel halfway across the state, small dim yellow lights in the parking lot, one flickering like it was about to die. I sat inside, trying not to think, but the silence made it worse, because the silence wasn't empty. I could hear my thoughts repeating back, slightly off tone, as though another version of me were sitting just out of sight, whispering along. When I spoke out loud to test it, the response came instantly, finishing the sentence before I could stop myself. I tried to scream, but it caught the sound before it left my throat, completing it perfectly with a calm, steady breath. The scream came out as a whisper, saying, "I know where you're going next." Morning, I woke to find my key missing, the one to my car. I searched the room, every drawer, every corner, until I saw it lying neatly on a nightstand beside the bed. Except it wasn't my motel key, it was my apartment key, the one I'd thrown away before leaving the city. I stared at it for minutes, feeling something shift in the air around me, the faint sound of slow breathing coming from inside the walls of the motel room. I left immediately, but when I stepped outside, the air felt still too heavy, and the parking lot looked different. Wrong, the buildings that had been next to the motel were gone, replaced by rows of dark windows, all facing me, every light inside flickering in rhythm with my heartbeat. And then I heard my own voice from somewhere behind me saying, "Quietly, you've already been here." I ran. I don't know how far, maybe not far at all, because every turn led me back to the same place, the same parking lot, the same flickering light, the same door. When I finally stopped running, my breath caught in my throat, and another breath answered it perfectly in sync. I went back inside, shaking, locked the door, sat against it, waiting for morning, but the night never ended. The air stayed black. The clock on the wall froze at 3. And in the stillness, I heard it, breathing from every direction, not loud, but steady, calm, patient, like something that knew it didn't need to chase me because I would end up exactly where it wanted me at some point. I fell asleep, or thought I did, because I found myself standing in a room I didn't recognize. Walls smooth, featureless, no corners, no edges, just endless dimness. The voice was everywhere, now, inside, outside, whispering in rhythm with my thoughts. "We finish what you start," and I understood it wasn't copying me anymore. It had learned me, absorbed me. There was no difference between the sound in my head and the one in the air. I spoke just to hear something of myself, but what came out wasn't my voice. It was slower, deeper, endless. It kept speaking long after I closed my mouth. Now, when I listen closely, I can still hear it, not loud, just beneath everything, like a faint breath in the quiet spaces between words. Sometimes when I'm talking to someone, I feel their sentence hesitate for a fraction of a second, and then I hear it finish for them in my own voice. They never seem to notice, but I do, and I think it's still spreading.